Welcome to Check In with Jason Lauritsen, where we explore how to create human, connected workplaces that employees love and that fuel organizational success. Each week, I invite someone who is leading the way in this work to join me for a conversation to help both educate and inspire us. Today, my guest is Chrisanne Christ. Chrisanne is the Senior Partner of HR Development at Centier Bank, a 130-year-old private family-owned bank headquartered in Merrillville, Indiana. Centier has over 1,100 associates and 62 branches within the state of Indiana. In her role, she works with Centier's CEO and senior management team to help shape the bank's strategic future through HR and talent programs built to support their servant culture, which we're going to learn more about in just a minute. Chrisanne, thanks for being with me.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. Hi, everyone.
So today we are going to talk about kind of how you are fostering and investing in community and connection within your organization, which is one of my most favorite topics to talk about. So I'm excited about that. But before we do that, let's learn a little bit more about you. So I always like to start with inviting you to tell us a little bit more about your work and the work you do there at the bank.
All right. Awesome. I basically take care of our people. That's my job, is to take care of our people. We are an associate first organization. We call our employees associates. And something that's important to us is to treat our associates with dignity. And so we never like that term employee. It's so common, sterile. And so one of the decisions we made a few years back was calling our employees associates. So when you hear me say associates, that's what I'm talking about. So we just basically have the mantra, take care of your people and they take care of the rest. And there's nothing really magical about it, but somehow a lot of companies don't adopt that way of focus, and it has proven itself to be very successful for us. And so my job is to take care of our associates and to provide the best career experience of their lives, to really focus on protecting and preserving our culture above all. Our CEO, he's a 50-year plus CEO. Fourth generation of his family. We have the fifth generation also in the bank. And he has said consistently, his legacy is our culture. It's not our size. It's not how many accounts we have. It is our culture. And so I have the fun job of helping ensure we do just that.
That's awesome. And we're going to dive into that and talk about what that looks like. You guys are doing some incredible stuff. So I'm curious, I always love to know or explore how people find their way into doing this work, right? The work of culture and people. So I'm curious, how did you find your way into this?
Oh, gosh. Well, I have a long story, but let me give you a shortened version of it. So I grew up in a family that didn't have a lot of money. My father was an alcoholic, lots of family challenges around having an alcoholic parent, mainly a single income family. My father also was a gambler, so the little money that we had sadly went to some of his gambling addiction. But a wonderful, wonderful man, just had, deep sickness. So I learned HR at a very young age, but I didn't really realize that until probably my late 30s, maybe early 40s, like, wow, I was an HR person as a youngin', because I would help my family through these challenges, some of the ups and downs, and trying to keep the peace, trying to talk to people, learn about, how I can help our family through this. So anyway, you fast forward it years later, and I was in a hospitality degree, wanted to go into hotel management. And while working in a hotel through college, the HR director of a very small team said, hey, I need some help on a turnover project. They had over 300% turnover at that time. And you're a college student. Can I use some extra hours of yours? Because I was kind of part-time or less than full-time at that point. And so I started working with him, and I'd never known what human resources was. And as I was working with him, I thought, oh my gosh, this is where I belong. Again, small department, so they didn't have any openings. So when I graduated, Even though my degree was more in hospitality, I decided to take the leap over into HR. He tried talking me out of it. You don't have the degree, you don't have the experience, you're not going to find a job. I lucked out, right place, right time, and that's what started my HR career. And I've just been going since. Now I do not just HR, I have talent development, and I also work with our community relations team. But ultimately, it just boils down to hospitality, which again is kind of funny years later that my hospitality degree and my HR experience is really proving itself strong here, because as a bank, we don't see ourselves as just a financial institution. Our CEO actually says we're in the hospitality business, even though we're not a hotel or a restaurant or some of those traditional hospitality industries. We see ourselves as hospitality because we take care of our associates, we take care of our clients in that manner.
Mm. I had never thought about that as a really like a degree that probably makes a ton of sense, especially in modern HR and kind of the way that it's evolving. I can respect the transition. I spent a decade of my life in HR leadership, and my degrees were in biology and philosophy. So you go figure, right? But the scientific part of it ended up being really helpful. There was a lot of helpful things in that. So it's amazing to me how many people we all find our way into HR however we find it. And
yes.
The fact that someone would say, no, you can't do that work without a degree is almost laughable given the people that I've taught. There's so many people in HR that
right.
we just happen into it because it calls to us, or we happen
right.
to be excited about it. So
right.
I am curious, what is it that you love about it today? Like, you've been doing this work a long time. What do you most love about the work you get to do?
It's ever changing. You don't get bored in HR. It seems like every year you think, okay, here's your business plan, here's your strategies, and then man, something pops up that is unexpected, and that could be stressful, and it is stressful. But in my way, it's also very challenging. Like, okay, all right, let's see how we're going to navigate this. And so I love the variety. People are so complex, and, obviously our associates are our greatest asset, but also they're our greatest challenge in some ways. And I find that thrilling, again, just always with how can we be better every year? How can we raise that bar? And I love when those challenges are thrown at me.
Well, and certainly no shortage of challenges these days when it
right.
comes to HR. So, well, let's transition into talking a little bit about some of the, getting into some of the work that you do there at the bank. And before we do that, I'm, kind of where we are today. I always like to start with some context, because all of our workplaces now kind of look different in terms of how much we are together in physical locations or how much we're distributed or whatever. So can you paint a picture of what the workplace at Centier looks like?
Yeah, sure. So we have a corporate headquarters. We actually didn't until 2008, even though we're around 130 years now. We were all spread out over branch locations. So we didn't really have a central office. But as we started growing outside, we're in Indiana, so outside of Northwest Indiana, we're pretty close to Chicago. We decided we need to centralize for efficiencies and meetings and such. So we built a corporate headquarters for the first time, and so a lot of our teams now are hubbed out of our corporate office. However, as you mentioned, we have over 60 branches, and so we're spread out over northern Indiana all the way down to Indianapolis in a lot of the major markets like South Bend and Fort Wayne and Lafayette and the greater Indianapolis markets. However, we do have sites on even southern Indiana in our future. So we want to be known as Indiana's bank, and we're just about there because we're the largest independent family-owned bank, but we continue to grow. So we have locations, over 60 branches. A lot of them are within Northwest Indiana because they're more of our legacy branches where we we're started in 2 counties, but now, gosh, we're again over quite a bit of the footprint in Indiana. So you think of a branch, a bank branch, you might have 3 to 5 associates working out of there. And then you have other types of positions too, like investment representatives, loan officers, and such. So they're also within a lot of our hubs in each market.
Now, I know one of the things that you mentioned this earlier, one of the things you're known for is your culture. I sort of mentioned that you talk about a servant culture. I'm curious what that means. Tell me, what does a servant culture mean and why is that important?
Yeah, and it's actually servant heart culture is what we
Okay.
call it. And there's a gentleman named Robert Greenleaf that years ago wrote a book. Our CEO is an avid reader. We have a book club, if you will, every year called Mike's Likes, and he reads about 75 books a year, and we dwindle them down to maybe 5. 1 or 2 are required, and then for our leadership, and then the other ones are optional. So somewhere years ago, he stumbled across a book by Robert Greenleaf that talked about servant heart leadership. And he went through a whole situation, our CEO, a health crisis, was very much a traditional autocratic, strong leader, didn't really have empathy and heart and went through a personal health crisis. And this book really spoke to him during that time. And essentially, servant heart leadership is putting others ahead of yourself. Kind of the golden rule too, but focusing on others instead of focusing on yourself and your career and your aspirations, but truly being a servant heart, having a servant heart toward others. And so as leaders, again, it's not focusing on your success and your goals. It's getting to know your people and how can I better serve them and their goals and their needs. And then what happens is, in turn, they're valued and appreciated, and so they want to work harder for you, and they want to help the success of the team and the company. And certainly, again, we have seen that live and in action all over our organization, and we feel our success is because of that servant heart mentality.
I'm curious, when that shifted for him, what was I'm curious what that looked like in terms of the internal, because it sounds like you've been a successful organization, obviously been around 130 years, but I'm curious what the sort of ripple effects of that were in terms of changes or in terms of just sort of how that transformed the way that you did business.
Yeah, it took a little while, right? Because he was a wonderful man, so I don't want to paint a negative picture. He just didn't have natural empathy. He was a type A personality, driven, competitive. We win, we grow, very growth, entrepreneurial mindset. He cared about his people back then, and we were a lot smaller. But when he was out for months of work because of his illness, everyone stepped in to keep the bank going. And so he received that servant heart experience personally before he even knew of those words. So he is indebted to those individuals that really stuck by him during a time when he was going through that crisis in his life. So when he came back, again, it took a while, it took years and years, and he continued to work on himself. How does he shift that deep mindset that he has to be more associate focused and not business and growth focused? And over time, leaning on other leaders that had these natural traits have been instrumental. I feel I've helped him in that case. We've built a very trusting relationship, especially since I started reporting directly to him, because I'm naturally that way. Again, going back to my childhood, right?
Yep.
And so he had to develop trust in me to say, Mike, I've got this. Like, let me handle this, or this is how we need to handle this. Trust me. And so having leaders around you that maybe help make up for where your deficiencies or strengths aren't. And I think that's important for all of us as leaders. You surround yourself with good people, especially in a diverse way, people that have different thoughts and experiences than you, and it helps strengthen everyone.
I love also the underlying kind of lesson in this is that oftentimes, I often say that like culture change only happens kind of two ways. Either there's a sort of a crisis that motivates a leader to change or a group of leaders to change, or there's new leadership, right? That's one of two ways normally because it flows from the leader. And I love that, he sort of understood that the change started with him. And then as he changed, I'm sure then that started to trickle down and you see those behaviors and he's behaving in a different way and he's leaning on other people. That's a really important lesson, I think, for us to remember that sometimes we expect the change to come without us needing to do the change as leadership or be the change as leadership and forget that it actually starts with us. It's not sustainable
Yes.
unless we change.
Yes, and hiring the right cultural fits. That's something that we, without a doubt, focus on, is especially in leadership positions, but really all of ours. Who are we bringing into the bank? Because if you don't have servant heart people, maybe they can have the best skills, the best experience, but it will ruin your organization. So we have a really strong HR team and recruiters that focus on culture fit first.
Mm.
And again, diversity, we don't expect people to be robots. But again, you have to have a natural servant heart. We can't teach you that. And if you don't, we won't bring you in the bank no matter how great you are in your position.
That's so important. So important. So I want to dive a little bit deeper into now. I know within kind of how you operate, and especially in this servant heart kind of approach or culture, that relationships and connection are really important. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about that, kind of the role that relationships play, how you think about the importance of relationships within the organization.
Yeah, relationships are everything. We have them with our clients. We empower our associates to spend time with people, not to get people in and out quickly, whether it's on the phone in our client solution center, which is like our call center, or in person. Develop deep relationships, get to know people, and we practice that within the bank. It's fun to celebrate successes, and it's easy to celebrate, someone's great news. But I think culture really shows itself too when you have difficult times, when someone's going through a divorce, a cancer diagnosis, they lose a close family member. We have clients that come in that were victims of fraud, that have lost a spouse that did all the banking for them. And so how we show up in those moments of need and difficulty, that really shows your culture. So that's one of the big focuses that we have, is we really empower everyone to stand beside whoever it is to help support someone through a difficult time. And that's the biggest cultural test that you can go through. And the way we model that internally is just having a lot of opportunities for our associates to build relationships with each other. As I mentioned earlier, Jason, we're spread out over the state of Indiana. Even though we might have a few hundred associates here, we still have hybrid and remote work and teams that are, structured off in their own areas. And so we've been very intentional every year about how can we provide more opportunities for our associates to get together on company time, paid time, to build relationships with each other, to model that behavior, and also, again, to know who do I go to when I need support, whether it's to help a client or to help a coworker, or just personally, I'm going through a tough time and who can I lean on within the organization. So we feel relationships are everything. And so over the years, HR has really been the initiator of getting people together, bringing people together. But it's gone all the way up to the support of our CEO too, because we do a lot of bank wide events. We still have a Christmas party, even though we're over 1,000 associates. And even during the recessionary years when we weren't hiring and we were, holding the fort down during those tough years, he said, we will still have our celebration of excellence, which always happens early in the year when we celebrate all the successes of our associates and accomplishments and service accomplishments. So it's not just profitability, it's also, we have a Servant Heart Award, for example. We have awards around our corporate values and who's modeling our corporate values, and lots of stories and recognition is shared. But he said during those tough years, we will not cut those things out, even though they are an expense, because this is a priority to us to bring each other together and celebrate and, and have fun together. So he sets the tone by that. And, when you have tough years, what you cut out sends a message, right? And if we cut out those fun events, those together events, then that's sending the message that these things aren't important to us.
So you bring people together. When you do that, is there anything in particular about, first off, I think that's incredible. It sounds like at least a couple times a year, you are intentionally bringing people physically together to the same place. When you bring them together, is there anything in particular that you do to ensure that, or to sort of support the connection or relationship building that's happening?
We do. So, we ensure that teams are comfortable. So, for example, because we have our celebration of excellence in the wintertime, we're concerned about, say, our Indianapolis or Fort Wayne associates driving to Northwest Indiana. So we rent buses, and not that they become party buses, because we make sure that they're not party buses in all the sense of that, but they're fun buses. And, we want associates to have fun within the teams that are coming up to Northwest Indiana to celebrate that. Again, we want to try thinking of what would prevent someone from doing this. How can we make this easier on them so they don't have worry or stress? Our Christmas party, we have hotel rooms so that, again, they can come and actually spend the night and not have to worry about driving home late at night after a Christmas party, especially, again, if the winter is rough, as often we have up here in Indiana. So trying to be very purposeful and intentional about thinking through, anticipating what might be an obstacle. Also getting feedback. We ask for feedback all the time from our associates. Instead of trying to guess or assume, why not just ask, right? But if you ask, you need to respond, because if you don't, that could be definitely an issue. So when we ask, what would make it easier on you? How did you enjoy this event? What are we missing? We respond to what our associates are telling us about those types of things.
That's awesome. Well, I know outside of the events, when we chatted a little bit initially, you shared with me that you have been more recently investing in building community internally. So, outside of when you bring people together for these big, awesome events, you're trying to do some things that are fostering community throughout the organization. And so I guess two questions. Number one is, why the focus on community now? Like, what is it about community that is calling to you, or what you are trying to accomplish there? And how are you going about doing that? What are you experimenting with, or what seems to be working?
Yeah, so since the pandemic, we still continue to have remote and hybrid associates. However, as you know, because we're a bank, we have plenty of associates. Half our associates, more than half, are coming into work every day because they can't work remotely. It's just not feasible within their positions. We do try to offer flexibility, though, right? So if somebody has a person coming to repair their dishwasher and they need to come in late, great. If they have a soccer game for their child that they want to attend and it's 4:00 and their location closes at 5 or 6, no problem. So we do offer that type of thing. But because we have all these different work styles and we're spread out over many hundreds of miles, we wanted to find ways for our associates to get together often in a virtual manner. And so, like a lot of companies, we have virtual meetings and committee things, training sessions, just a lot of things offered virtually out of convenience. But one of the successes that we've put in were associate resource groups or employee resource groups, as they're commonly known out there. And we learned about them through other best practices that some companies were doing. So they're not our creation by any means. But what we have done is we've asked our associates, what type of groups would you like us to form? And so we have developed those over time, and we continue to add more each year. Some of them are more affinity based. Like this year, we have some individuals that have like a garden/flower group. And so if they want gardening tips, or like, hey, my plant's dying, does anyone know why? We have a group focused on that. And actually here in our corporate area, they want to get together in the spring and plant more flowers together, and, tomato plants and things like that on our property. So some of their sessions, of course, are virtual, but those that are in person will be doing those types of things. And then we have other types of focus. We're a financial institution, and one thing we didn't have is a lot of abilities for associates to get together to ask questions that are financially related. Duh, we should have done that years ago. So we have a group that's called Financial Empowerment. And so we have some of our experts on talking about ways that our own associates can save more money and, ultimately be more financially independent, focusing on retirement and just learning things that maybe they've just never been taught in their life around budgets and, again, saving money. And then, of course, in turn, now they're learning, and they can be able to help our clients even better. So that's going to be just a great group that will spread out to our clients and our communities. We have people that do financial presentations now, and so this is going to just be strengthening their skills. So again, we've asked our associates, what can we bring you together to build better relationships and learn more along the way? And they've given us these topics for these groups, and they've changed. We started them during the pandemic, again, as a way to bring people together. And we have co-leaders, so HR is not actually leading these groups. We have leaders, we have communities of practice where they can also learn from each other, all the leaders of the groups to get together quarterly. Like, what are you guys doing that maybe we're not? We have this challenge. How are you navigating it? And so that's another group that got together as a community of practice through the ARG process. The other great result is not just people getting together, but because HR doesn't lead these groups and our own associates do, people that maybe didn't have a leadership role in their department or branch now have a leadership role. So we're building future leaders. They're getting really great experience stepping up into a role to lead this group. And we've had individuals get promoted, that have been part of these groups because they've grown because of this responsibility that they've taken on. Everything's on paid time. So, these groups, when they meet, they do meet during work time. They work out schedules between them as to what works best for the group. And, you attend what you can, but usually they're an hour or less. We bring in guest speakers too. A lot of them are our own clients. Maybe they're a minority-owned business or a female, that has risen in her career. And so she may come in and talk about how she navigated challenges, as a woman, maybe in a male-dominated field. So, we love bringing in clients or community business owners or leaders and highlighting their accomplishments and letting our own associates learn from people outside of the bank too. So we're literally pulling our community in from the outside inside.
Well, there's so many things about that I think are important. If you're thinking about doing this, I think some of the things that it sounds like have really driven the success is HR is facilitating, creating the opportunity, but HR is not leading this. The HR is not the one controlling it. You're engaging the employees in doing that. You're also using feedback from employees to determine what it is they need, what they want, and then creating that for them or helping them create that. I love allowing the opportunity for it to be self-led and let your leaders emerge in those. I mean, there's so many really great practices. And I think perhaps the one place where I see people try to do something like this and then they get frustrated that the results aren't there is that they don't recognize that what you are doing is investing in this in a very significant way. You're creating space during work, paid time for them to do this. And I think that's oftentimes where a lot of organizations will be like, sure, we want to do this, but you got to do this on your own time, which sends a very different kind of message, right? We care about it, just not enough to actually have you not to pay you to do it, which I think you're sending an incredible message there that says, no, this is really important. And that's why we're making space. And so I'm curious what you have seen in terms of impact. Like, how do you know that these communities that have been formed are having benefit, or what have been the benefits that you've noticed of doing this?
Well, one thing, should say a couple of things that have helped is we do have executive sponsors too over these groups. So they may not attend every meeting, but it is somebody that might be in a department head role or a senior leadership role that is there as a guide on the side. They try to attend as many meetings as they can, and they may, like if somebody brings an idea forward, like, hey, maybe the bank could be doing this, or can we add this as a product or service? Or, for example, we had a group that was talking about challenges as Hispanic children that they had with parents that didn't speak English. And they said as children born in the United States, they had to be translators for their parents in many cases. They didn't understand what they were translating. Like if they came into a bank, for example, they didn't know what a CD was or banking, yet they had to serve in that capacity for their parents. And so they thought it would be great if we had signage that showed I speak these languages. Maybe I speak Serbian or Spanish or Polish, whatever the language is within our communities. So individuals can immediately go up to that person that speaks their language. And so that was a question that came out of this group. Could we do that? And so the executive sponsor brought it to our senior leadership team and said, how do we feel about this? And so we do have that now. Now we don't force anyone to do it, so it is optional, but we have had many associates loving that. We have a big Macedonian community, for example, up in Northwest Indiana, and we've had clients receive that very well, knowing who speaks Macedonian. I don't have to ask or feel uncomfortable, and I don't have to bring someone with me anymore. I know I can go to this branch and speak to a person, that understands what I'm trying to do or say. And so there's been positives like that. As I mentioned, we've had promotions based on individuals that have gone through and served in a leader or co-leader in our groups. The confidence, too, of somebody that's getting this opportunity to grow and develop, because that's also very important to us. We know our associates want to be invested in. They want growth and development, and this is just one way, in addition to all of our talent development programs that we have, to enable someone real life experience at, developing themselves.
Like the best way to learn is to do, right? And you're creating
Mm-hmm.
opportunities for them to practice.
Mm-hmm.
That's terrific. Well, thank you for unpacking that. There's so much good stuff in there that I think could be used and applied and taken to experiment with within your own organization, right? To think about how to do that. So thank you for that. I'm gonna change gears. I'm gonna ask you a few questions as we near the end. One is, I'm curious, what's a current challenge that you are wrestling with at work right now, and how are you tackling it?
Well, in a couple of months, we're going to be starting a major platform conversion within the bank. We outgrew our old platform, so we're going to be moving to a new one. And anybody that's gone through like a major conversion knows how much stress that puts on people because you have your day job to do, and then you're starting to migrate everything over to a new system. And in addition to that, there's going to be a client impact, as changes happen, just a whole new way of working. You're no longer an expert because you're learning a brand new system. And so we have a lot of specialists that work in banking and they get very, very good at what they do. And now we're going to be moving their cheese and they're going to be on the same playing field as someone that's been there a year or less. And so, how does that feel when you're no longer the expert? So, it's just going to be a lot of change, a lot of stress. Our associates are very excited about it because they've been asking for a new system, but they don't realize how until you get into it how stressful it will be. And
Yeah.
so my role is going to be a big part of how we communicate and navigate those changes and how we care for our people and what we do for them to be stress relievers and just to ensure that they feel supported and someone's got their back, and when they need help there's ways to do that. We're going to be doing pulse surveys to take the temperature on our teams, real quick surveys. How are you feeling? What do you need help with? And so we have some strategies in place, but some of it, as I mentioned, is just as you go, what's needed. All right, let's get moving and let's fix this or help this. So HR is going to have a major, part to play in this.
Yeah. Well, and I suspect you will do really well because of your commitment to caring for your people and sort of checking in with them so frequently and intentionally. That's really the key, right? Is making sure you're on top of what's going on. And if there's a struggle that you can adjust and you can support them. And so I have no doubt that you will crush it based on what I have heard today. So all right. So the last kind of big question I have for you is one I love to ask everyone. And it's just inviting you to look into your sort of hopeful crystal ball and project into the future. When you think about work 5 years from now, which is interesting because we're roughly about 5 years from when COVID came in and completely changed the world of work. When you think of work now 5 years into the future, what do you hope will be different about work broadly than it is today?
Yeah, that's a loaded question, and we can get it completely wrong. What I see today, 5 years after COVID, and obviously even the social media environment plays a large part of it, is just the division that's going on out in society. And, when I look at my news feed every morning, with my cup of coffee, and it's just one thing after another, right? And so, even subconsciously, these things go into our brain, and I try not to read half the things, well, most of the things that I see out on social media. If you click into an article and, heck, all the algorithms, they're trying to give us more of what we click on. And so our people are coming to work with a lot, whether they realize it or not, that they're just exposed to out in the social media channels. And politically, there's so much division out there. And, whether you're political or not, again, you're hearing things, your family might be talking about things. And so you come to work with a lot of this on your mind or in your heart, whether you agree or disagree about what's going on out there. I'm hoping that dies down in the next 5 years,
Mm,
and we
mm,
we kind of pull back on some of that division and find more commonalities, that we see the good out there instead of looking for the bad or, the negative things out there. I
mm.
know we feel obligation as an employer to make sure our environment doesn't allow that. We address challenges if we hear someone celebrating something that another person might be crying about. We feel that's our responsibility. We want to stick to our culture being, again, servant heart, you before me. And so when we are recruiting and we talk about our servant heart culture and all through the ways we manage our associates and our environment, we want to create that culture of community and support. And so whenever we find there's somebody not doing something that aligns to our culture, we are on it. And we don't want to just fire somebody, because that's not what we want, but we want to bring them along. We believed in them and we want to bring them along. But if they find there's not alignment, then certainly we will help them in their next steps. When you let go of somebody that was once a family member, you want to do it in the right, compassionate way and wish them well and celebrate their success somewhere else, and support them in their next steps. So sometimes we do have to part ways because there isn't alignment culturally anymore. So back to your question, Jason, I just really hope there's more calmness and more community and, again, looking at kindness and support for one another instead of how we're different or how we might be divided.
Well, I think the work you are doing is really vital in that. I mean, I think one of the things that, as I think about the time we're in right now, I think one of the places that the work can be done to bring us back together and to sort of start to break down this polarization and division is the workplace, right? Because it's one of the few places that everybody still has to go, and you're going to have to interact with people who are different. And I love that you're actively finding ways to bring people together around commonalities, right?
Yeah.
Building that community. And I think if you show them the path there and they discover how powerful that is, that doesn't stay at work, right? It spills over into their community. So
right.
You are manifesting this thing into existence. So I appreciate the work that you're doing. It's incredibly important.
Another thing spilling into the community that I think a lot of employers could do is we have a very active community relations team. And what we've done is utilize them to find community offerings that we can use as team building. So even some of our fully remote teams will get together to help out at a food bank or a Meals on Wheels, packing bags. So there's a lot of ways that you can do team building and relationship growth by supporting your communities. Clothing drives, I mean, there's so many. So we also use that strategy. It's a win-win-win situation.
Indeed it is. Indeed it is. So this has been awesome. So much great stuff in this. As we wrap up, Chrisanne, I like to do a checkout, a one-word checkout. So I will ask you in one word, how are you feeling as we wrap up our conversation today?
Oh, I'm feeling great. I hope I gave someone ideas. I've learned by reading or watching podcasts or, listening to other leaders out there, other companies that are doing some awesome things. And I hope somebody got a nugget today.
Well, I'm going to cheat because my one word checkout is 2 words. And I would say it's nourished because of hearing about the great work that you're doing, and that it's just so meaningful. And I'm so grateful for the work that you are doing in the world. And I'm also hopeful because I think the thing you are doing is what we need more of. And so I am certain that people will be able to be inspired by this and take some pieces back, hopefully, to do some good work in their organization. So thank you so much for the conversation. Thank you for sharing, and thank you for being a light in this work. I appreciate you.
Awesome. And yeah, if anyone wants to reach out to me too, Jason, I'm happy to share anything and everything I can to help others, because if you keep it all to yourself, it's not meaningful. And so I would love to help other work environments be able to do some of the things that we found great success with.
Where is the best place for them to connect with you? LinkedIn?
LinkedIn, or even my email is cchrist@centier, CENTIER.com. Either way.
Hit you up. All right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And thank you for listening today. I hope you can take some of this incredible insight, some of these incredible ideas and take them back to your organization to improve your workplace and make work a more human connected experience for your people. And please, please, please remember, check in with those people that matter most in your life. That may be the most important thing that you can do today. Until next time.